Okay, next we're going to have David Van Gilder. David, welcome, David.
Thank you, Senator Niemeyer, Chairman Niemeyer, and the members of the committee. My name is David Van Gilder. I'm the Senior Policy and Legal Director for Hoosier Environmental Council. We rise today in opposition to the bill for a couple of very specific reasons and some general ones as well. This sprawling bill covers the entirety of Title 13, and thus Hoosier Environmental Council's remarks today cannot address all of the issues presented by the 176 pages that dropped on Thursday morning. I'll just focus on three major issues. First, we start with the certainty that Hoosiers strongly oppose weakening laws and other measures that are meant to protect them and future generations from harm. Second, despite that reality, many of these changes to Title 13 benefit polluters, not citizens. And third, if the goal was to reduce the number of words, provisions, offices, this bill falls short. The vagueness of some of the new provisions will present more complications than they intend to resolve. So back to the first point, the idea that industry is somehow burdened by a set of guidelines set by this legislative body and its deliberations and honed by expert technical consideration and writing has at least two problems. First, it's ideologically anachronistic. That is, it is a reprise of the James Watt, President Reagan era idea that government should just get out of the way of industry. The idea didn't work then, and it doesn't fly now in 2026. The people of Indiana have seen what happens when their air, water, wetlands, and natural lands to those things when sensible and needed protections are reduced or taken away. And second, the burden is on our children and on future generations to clean up the messes left by unchecked industry. When IDEM asked for public comment on the governor's executive orders this year, the response was overwhelmingly in favor of continued and even strengthened protections. Fewer than 30 comments of the 1,440 pages that the commissioner mentioned as a response to the EO were from business or industrial concerns, and even those comments could not find much burden to complain about. The other 1,410 detailed environmental comments detailed the environmental burdens to Hoosiers and asked IDEM and the governor to listen to them. In many ways, this bill does not do that. And as Senators Taylor and Jackson and Disgoski just pointed out, no one there on the front row of this committee was advised or even consulted about this. Likewise, groups like Hoosier Environmental Council that have been active in this state for 43 years and are among the leading environmental advocacy organizations and protectors of people's health, along with CEC and Indiana Conservation Voters. None of us saw the contents of this bill until Thursday. Second, to my second point, B point, there's a non-existent list of how this bill, if passed, would benefit polluters, not people. It completely eliminates the long existing requirement that state agencies consider the full environmental impact of state actions by preparing an impact statement. That's section 50. Throughout, and in many different contexts, the bill changes the word shall to may, thus giving IDEM the option to. For example, in section 86, the commission would now end up issuing a permit to an applicant with unsatisfied tax warrants. Before they should not do that, now they may do that. Section 103, the Environmental Rules Board no longer is required to consider such things as existing air, water, quality, and public's right to clean environment when making rules under Indiana Code 13-14-8-4. In section 14, even in a situation of, quote, imminent and substantial endangerment found by the commissioner, with this change, the commissioner may not bring suit to stop the threat. He's not required to. He may do it. If your child is running into traffic, as a parent, shall is the word that's to be used, not may. Those are just a handful of them. The last one I'll point out is section 64. The requirement that the state of Indiana shall adhere to or take into consideration federal environmental rules politicizes the agency by tying IDEM, our individual states' actions, to that of federal policy. I'm not sure we want to do that. Further, multiple sections of in multiple sections, the commissioner would not consider not only whether a state rule is more stringent than, but now also whether it will be burdensome to the affected industry. Take a look, for example, at section 112, affecting IC 131493. We don't know what burdensome means. Burdensome to whom? Who is being burdened? Is industry being burdened? Is that the consideration, or is it the people being burdened? I think it's a vague word, and it's going to cause a lot of consternation and possibly litigation. This may have been addressed by Commissioner Wood's comments, but the entire section on permitting nuclear power plants is deleted. And I'm not sure what replaces it. I mean, surely there's a federal, there's an Indiana Supreme Court rule on that, but we've just talked at the beginning of this year, 2025, actually last year now, all about small nuclear reactors. Is there any provision left in the code after this that allows IDEM to take a look at permits for nuclear reactors, even the small ones? Section 156 eliminates testing of automobile emissions, even in counties where moderate non-attainment for with moderate non-attainment for ozone. That's IC 131759. This is one way to say you don't have a pollution problem. You just quit testing for it. Sections 162 to 164. Bypasses local planning authority for incineration of PCBs, one of the most toxic compounds that has been widely used in this country for decades. Section 175 forfeits agency review of plans for permitting sanitary sewer and public water mains if those plans are drawn by a professional engineer. So if a professional engineer gives you plans, you don't have to review them anymore. I'm an attorney, that wouldn't fly. If I wrote a brief to the Court of Appeals and said, hey, I'm a licensed attorney and been practicing for 40 years, guess what? The Court of Appeals is going to review my brief for its accuracy. Section 180 eliminates a useful catch-all provision that IDEM could use to prevent pollution. It's sort of it's Indiana Code Section 13-18-4-4. And for the last point, even though the bill repeals many sections of a statute, it also creates a new pollution prevention program, new definitions and regulations around anaerobic digestion facility, appropriate feedstock, beneficial use facility. It changes rules on what and how IDEM decisions may be subject to judicial review, creates a whole new Indiana Recycling Market Development Board. So it takes away, but it also adds, and it adds some vague and confusion as well. Finally, I was heartened that the bill on Section 49 does continue to recite some elements of the policy of the state of Indiana, which are reflected in Indiana Code Section 13-12-4-4, particularly those that require the state of Indiana through its environmental policies to protect current and future generations of Hoosiers. We wish that IDEM would continue to do that. We know that there's been a significant amount of work put into this bill. We applaud the fact that Commissioner Woods has met with the environmental community and others at least twice since he's been appointed, and provided a forum for us to give some feedback to IDEM, but we're slightly disappointed that that forum was not extended with the development of this very complicated bill, which is about to get moved on from this committee today. We would have liked to have more time to consider all of its very complicated provisions. With that, I will stop, and I thank the chair for his indulgence in my rambling here and would be happy to take any questions.
David, thank you. I think Senator Buck have a comment.
Yeah, just very briefly, is there anything in this bill that's harmful to federal code or law?
If you mean harmful to federal code by changing provisions of the Clean Water Act and other major federal policies, I don't see that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to, first of all, thank you for your testimony. I want to ask you about a couple things. Why would somebody change in section 91 of the page 35 of the bill? Why would, if you were drafting the bill, why would you change a shall to a may when it comes to maintaining information in the clearinghouse on solid waste minimization, hazardous waste minimization, hazardous waste reduction? Why would you change it from a shall to a may?
Well, of course, Senator, I can't get into anybody's head as to why they did it, but
No, I'm saying, why would you do it?
I would do it if I was trying to prevent people from knowing what was going on in those areas.
Okay. Let me go to another section. Section 118, page 138, says the board may develop criteria for determining hazardous waste. So does that say to you that the board doesn't have to, because it was a shall before? So does that mean that IDEM now has the ability to say we have no rules for determining hazardous waste?
Senator, I think anytime you change a mandatory shall to a discretionary may, then somebody could make a decision not to do something.
So we could have the State Department of Environmental Management that determine that there is no reason to develop criteria for determining hazardous waste. Now, if we pass this bill, they could do that. They would have that ability under the law.
If it's discretionary, yes.
Okay. Last question. Section 268, which is page 139 of the bill. This has to do with corrective action plans. It says, the original law says the board shall adopt rules setting standards corrective action for releases of hazardous waste and constituents from any solid waste management unit at a hazardous waste facility. It now says the board may set standards. So if there is a corrective action for release of hazardous waste, the board now would have the discretion of whether or not they would make rules for a company to release hazardous waste.
Again, may is a discretionary word. I would also point out that there's a federal rule regarding solid waste management, and some of the language that's changed in here could, in fact, run afoul of the federal rules that way.
But it does leave the discretion. So reality is a company could say, we're going to be releasing hazardous waste. IDEM issues a corrective action thing, usually after some investigation into the fact that they're doing something wrong. And then the board can say, we're not going to make any rules for you releasing this hazardous waste.
If it's may, then it's discretionary.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Baldwin.
I've got to take issue with some of this. I'm listening and I'm trying to bite my tongue a little bit. You know, I read this bill with an eye toward, is this in any way damaging the environmental standards here in the state of Indiana? And I just did not find much at all. I understand that you've got a position on that, but when I hear things like this, it sort of leads me to believe that the other things that you might have said today might also look the same. But these environmental data clearinghouses are populated by what? Third-party feeds, federal feeds, user input, things that the state doesn't control. Yet if the state decides they're going to have a clearinghouse that they shall maintain, they're relying on third-party data. So they're leaving themselves up to litigation and exposure if they do that. So they've removed that hook. It's just now a may. I don't understand how we're going to hold an agency accountable for maintaining a data clearinghouse when they're not the ones that populate the data. They're just holding it. Yet we're going to have them adhere to the requirement of the data accuracy. This is an unnecessary burden for the state of Indiana, and it puts Hoosiers at risk for unnecessary torts. I don't understand why we would paint it in that way. It just doesn't even look fair at all in any way, in my humble opinion. And I think several of these other things, and I won't wear the chair out with the multiple things like this that I saw. But as I looked at this bill, it looked like a very simple, it was a bill to kind of clarify agency authority. It looked like a bill that was getting rid of some things that were just ancient or inconsistent with federal law. And it seems to be painted as though it's a declination of Hoosiers' environmental rights and the obligations. I just would completely disagree with that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Brother.
Thank you.